The single event that kicked this whole thing off took place 2.5 years ago, and that was the huge Destination Star Trek London 2012 exhibition at the Excel Center, which is an enormous convention center. It's like Las Vegas. It's the London version of the Las Vegas one. And there were 30,000 people who attended over 2.5 days. And I spoke at this amazing convention and met so many wonderful, engaging, and lovely people. And I was so moved by the experience. I mean, I met thousands of people. And I was so moved by the experience. I mean, these people were so interested in everything that I had done 34 years previously. And many of them knew more about my participation in what I had to do with the Enterprise than I did. I mean, they brought up stuff I'd forgotten. It was a fascinating experience. And as I said in the blurb, that's what moved me on the Monday morning when I woke up. I thought, I've got to write about this. I mean, there are so many people who are so hungry for any little morsel they can get, because back then, in 1978 and 79, none of us had a clue as to what would happen with Star Trek. Everyone thought that, okay, well, we'll make this movie, and then that's it. And then on to the next project, which was Blade Runner in 2010, and I can't remember what else, Airplane, and I got involved with all kinds of things. And, so what we were doing wasn't all that well documented because we didn't think anything of it. Star Trek had kind of finished on TV, and they were going to do a blowout TV special, sort of a swan song, if you will. And then in 1977, Star Wars came out and just changed the whole nature of the ball game. And Gene Roddenberry and the powers that be at Paramount kind of looked at each other and thought, wait a minute, we have a huge fan base. Star Wars had no fans. I mean, it was a brand new film, but it was a spectacular movie. And so they thought, let's make a movie. And so they did. And then that was going to be it. Made the movie, it was over, gone. And if somebody back then had said, by 2015, way out in the future, there are going to be 11 more movies. I mean, they'd have thought you were nuts, really, at that time. So what I'm saying is we didn't catalog what we were doing or log it very well at all. And so there's a lot of interest out there as to what really went on back then. So anyway, I thought, I better write about it, my part of it anyway, as much as I can contribute. And then as a result of the book, via Mark Stetson, who, if you buy the book, you'll read about him. Lovely, lovely man and a good friend. And I got back in touch with Richard Taylor and Jim Dow, and we hadn't seen each other since 1979. That was 34 years. And I'm living in Surrey in England at the moment. So I flew to LA to get together with them. And we all met up at Richard's watering hole, the Pacific Dining Car in Santa Monica. A very expensive watering hole. Woo! Very nice, but pricey. But anyway, they gave us a private room so I could do an interview with them. And I even then I hadn't grasped what might be happening, because I'd only just put out the book. And so I brought my little point-and-shoot Canon, beautiful camera, it takes fabulous pictures, and it does HD movies as well in this tiny little point-and-shoot. So I set that up on the table with those little collapsible, funny little tripod legs that you can bend. I mean, this is a real classy operation. And but anyway, so and the camera would only record 10 minutes at a time, and so we had to keep stopping, and we were drinking wine, and it was all getting a bit. But the interviews are actually quite good, and so then I did all that, and I put the interviews up on a private site, which you can see if you buy the book. And then and we had wondered what happened to our original enterprise, and so I said I would do some digging around, and Paramount had auctioned off a bunch of models, including the Enterprise, back in 2006, and it was in severely damaged, compromised condition. It was really embarrassing. It should never be seen in public, and thankfully it never will be because it's in private hands, so that's fine. But the thing is, Star Trek has no Enterprise. I mean, it doesn't have its greatest symbol that every fan absolutely loves. Or at least that's what I got from, all the people who came up to me, and people who write to me, say, oh, it's, I'd love to see her again. So anyway, I kept in contact with Richard and Jim and flew out to LA again the following year in 2014. And Boyd Crompton of TrekWorks in San Antonio had called me up and said, Paul, why don't you guys build another one? I mean, you're the only people with the provenance to do it. You're still around and kicking. Thank you, Boyd. And why don't you build another one? So Boyd met me in L.A. He flew out to L.A. and he had never seen either the Pacific or Atlantic Ocean. So the first thing we did before we met up with Richard and Jim and Mark is I drove him out Sunset Boulevard all the way to the end, and we got out to the beach and parked the car, and I ordered Boyd to take off his shoes and socks and get out and get his feet wet in the Pacific Ocean, and which he did, and I took pictures of him for his wife and kids. Anyway, lovely guy, Boyd, and he's a prime mover in the sense that he came up with an idea that certainly didn't cross my mind or Richard's or Jim's. So Boyd interviewed us for a second lot of interviews, and so we've got over 5 hours of interviews that you can see if you get the book. And then I came back to England, and the thinking was, at the time, that Paul Allen had purchased the Enterprise because it was an anonymous buyer, and Christie's certainly keep that to themselves, and that seemed to be the established internet wisdom amongst the fans. Well, I got a real lesson there because the internet wisdom is not all it's cracked up to be. Anyway, I spent a lot of time trying to get through to Paul Allen, and of course he's got layers and layers and layers of people to keep him, because I'm sure he's got people wanting to get hold of him all the time for various things, and probably holding their hand out more than anything. But I wanted to find out who owned it, who owned the Enterprise, and because I thought, well, we'll give them first crack at it. We'll restore it. But if we do that, then it has to go into public hands. I mean, there's no point in restoring it for a private person. We have no interest in that. What we want to do is to have the Enterprise out in the public where the public can see her. It's where she belongs. So anyway, it turned out Chris Wright knew Richard Branson, of course. Chris Wright was Chrysalis Music, and I was over at Gary and Frankie Brooker's house, and Frankie said, "Oh, Paul, Chris." Oh, I've got it here, I think. Chris, I do. Chris has written a book, and I'll tell you what, it's a cracking book. If you are interested in the music business, get Chris's book. It's fascinating. And then Frankie said, well, we're in it, of course, because Procol Harum was one of Chrysalis's first acts 10 years after. and Jethro Tull. And then she said, Paul, you're in the book too. So I thought, Chris knows Richard Branson. Richard Branson's rocket, his first rocket, was called the Enterprise. And Branson is a bit of a Trekkie. And the guy who designed Branson's rocket, and this was stuff I was finding out, was a fellow named Burt Rutan, who had a company in Mojave in California called Applied Materials, I think, something like that, who developed Branson's rocket. And Burt was financed by Paul Allen. And I thought, oh, this is all too sweet, and Richard obviously knows Paul because of the connection with the guy who built his rocket. So, and Chris knew Richard. So I had a meeting with Chris, and Chris said, yeah, I'll get you Richard's details. And so I got hold of Richard and sent him an email, and boy, he sent one right back from his island and saying, well, it sounds fascinating. And then I heard nothing else from him, and then he had a test firing of the rocket, and I didn't hear back from him. So, but I found out then that Paul Allen didn't, in fact, have the Enterprise, and somebody else had it. Or we thought somebody else had it. Well, somebody else did have it, but the person we thought had it didn't have it. In fact, I now know who has it, and it's gone. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying that we're back to recreating the Enterprise. And so Jim and Richard and I knocked it around through emails, and I said, look, why, if we're going to do this again, let's make it 12 feet long, because the original we did was 8 feet long. And I said, we want to put it on display and take it all around the world, and I'll hopefully, have it feature in a series of films as well. And so let's make it, let's make a knockout original. I mean, it'll look like the Enterprise, but it'll be much finer and much more beautiful and much more detailed, and we can really get into the interior and through the windows and everything. So so they loved that idea, because now we're creating an original. We're not recreating something we'd already done. We're actually creating a new thing. I mean, it'll be your familiar Enterprise, but it'll just look so much nicer and so much better. But it's going to cost an arm and a leg, and and a bunch of things, because we have to hire out a facility that's going to be secure, and we'll have to have 24-hour security on it, and a janitor, and pay bills, and we have to kit out a place with all the modern tools and materials, and they're expensive. And build a spray booth, and in California that's a tricky one because of the air controls and everything, so there's a ton of money that just goes into that. And then it's going to take us 16 months. It'll take 2 months to set up the shop, and then it's going to take us 16 months to build the Enterprise, and for me to paint it and to detail it and get it absolutely perfect. So it's a huge undertaking. So then I said, well, we need to, obviously we need to raise the money. And so Richard and Jim said, fine, go ahead, Paul. So here I am digging a hole for myself. And so I thought, okay, what's the best way to do this? And so I developed all these premiums and designed a website and everything called 1701 Rebuild, and which is now defunct. But because this site goes live, to attract fans to contribute towards working capital, where I could hire a PR company who would then get the word out to fans all over the world, because by most estimates there are 50 million of you out there, and if I can just reach a fraction of you, we'll be able to do this. And I believe in obviously giving something back, and so if you'll look at all the premiums below, you'll see that, you know, for any contribution, you get a fair whack back, because that's only, you know, it's only right. And then you also have the satisfaction of knowing that you're helping us, and you become a member of the Hall of Fame, and there'll be all kinds of goodies that come along down the way for everyone who contributes. So I had that website. I raised the money to hire a PR company, and who are getting the word out to you now. And then a very dear friend of mine, Rob Goodyear, who is horrendously talented. I mean, boy, what an artist and designer he is. Designed this website. I mean, look at it. You know, I knocked my socks off when he said, well, how about this? Because we were talking about it, and I said, well, I'll get a bunch of stuff together, and but we hadn't really formalized it at all. And about 6 hours later, he just sent me an email. He said, have a look at this. and here was this beautiful animation of the Project Enterprise and the ship coming in, and oh, you know, and I just thought, this is great. You know, things are really falling into place. And so here we are. And you know, and it's really up to you and your friends and all Star Trek fans all around the world, because this really needs to be done. I mean, Star Trek is without its greatest symbol, and the Enterprise is the most loved object and recognized object in the whole world. I mean, okay, the Mona Lisa is very recognized, so is the Tower of Pisa, but the Mona Lisa doesn't have a fan base of 50 million people, nor does the Tower of Pisa, or nor does anything else you can think of. The Statue of David, the Trevi Fountain, you know, I mean, it just, the Enterprise is unique. And she's gone. And that's a travesty. I mean, it's just an absolute travesty. And so we want to do that. And you know what? And for us as well, it'll be a wonderful legacy. I mean, what more could we do, you know, the three of us, than to recreate this beautiful, beautiful spaceship for the world, for all the fans and for all the world. And out of modern materials that will last for centuries. And quite frankly, when I finished airbrushing all the pearl detail on the Enterprise, it was always in a brightly lit room in a, you know, studio with neon lights everywhere, because I needed light everywhere for all the, you know, fine work well, everybody did, you know, the modelers, all the detailing they had to do with little dental tools and everything, because the camera lens was going to get right up next to it. And the boys who, after I finished it, and they wheeled it into the shooting stage, and the lighting boys who were going to light it dramatically, and the shooting stage was black, everything, black velvet, black floor, black, you know, black everything. And they locked everyone out, including Doug Trumbull, the director. I mean, they locked everyone out for 3 days while they got the Enterprise all lit up in the dry dock. And then when they were all ready, they called us in, and we were all holding hands, and the lights were out and everything, and they turned on the lights, and I was gobsmacked. We all were. I mean, everybody just went, we couldn't believe it, how stunningly beautiful it was. But unfortunately, filming techniques at the time were relatively primitive compared to what you can do now. And we couldn't light the model brightly enough to get all the colors to pearlesce, and as the camera would travel over them, they would all change color. And I mean, the Enterprise looked like an opal. It was just so beautiful. I was really knocked out. I thought, wow, you know, I didn't know I was that good. And so anyway, it looked spectacular. But and even though I've had hundreds and hundreds of fans and model makers write to me and say, you know, I just love the Enterprise and the way she looked on the screen and everything. I'm telling you, what you saw on the screen was 20 or 30% of what she looked like. And even Darren Doctorman, who's been very kind, loaning us stills of his CGI enterprise that he used for the director's cut of Star Trek the Motion Picture to kind of enhance things a bit in certain shots. He didn't have anything to go by because all he had to go by was what he could see on film, which wasn't much. But now, of course, she can be lit brightly. You'll be able to see all the beautiful, beautiful colors and detail. I mean, she will really knock your socks off. And we can isolate her from the background now using CGI, using computers, so we can get a nice, clean, what's called a matte, to drop in a background seamlessly, which we couldn't do before because that was all done using film techniques and white screen and green screen, and which is problematical at best. And in fact, you can see my hair is disappearing into the background. Okay, this is a primitive green screen setup. But so anyway, we have this opportunity. We have the skills, we have the desire, and all we need is the money. And as there are tens of millions of you out there, hopefully a fraction of you will contribute and you'll get something very nice back in return. So that's where we are. That's the history so far. And thank you very much. Bye-bye.